good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, you thirsty bunch of beer drinkers, whenever and wherever you're tuning in from. It's great to be back with you mid-December, talking about our favorite beverage in the world, that is fresh craft beer. Today on the show, I have the privilege to speak with Christine Comeau, the Executive Director of the Canadian Craft Brewers Association. The CCBA, as they're known within the industry, bill themselves as the voice of Canadian craft beer, who represent the interests of a growing industry of nearly 1,200 small and independent craft breweries, brewpubs, and their supplier partners in every province and territory in Canada. Christine is a seasoned executive with extensive experience in marketing, brand strategy, and leadership within Canada's craft beer and beverage industries. Apart from her current position with the CCBA, she has also led initiatives such as the Canada Beer Cup and held leadership roles with Craft Alcohol NB, executive director there, and Moosehead Breweries as the marketing director. Rumor has it that she was the boss of Andrew Oland back then. We have a lot to discuss today. I'll be asking Christine to share details about the recent federal beer excise tax win for small brewers, about the GST HST federal tax holiday and how it impacts the industry, running the New Brunswick Craft Brewers Association, and promoting the Canada Beer Cup to all breweries. We're going to get into all that and much more, so sit back, grab a fresh GLB, and enjoy the show. Hang tight. We'll be right back with Christine Comeau.
Looking for the perfect gift for the holidays? Look no further than GLB's 12 Beers of Christmas Pack. It includes a mix of 12 of your favorite fresh GLB brands and seasonal brews, plus 2 limited edition GLB Hoppy Tulip glasses. They look like hop snowflakes floating around in a beer-filled snow globe. Grab your 12 Beers of Christmas Pack at our Great Lakes Brewery retail store or online right now, and make the holidays happy and hoppy.
Christine, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on Between Two Fermenters.
Well, thank you for joining me, Troy. It's really great to be here.
Now, I got it. I can't understand why you couldn't make the drive all the way from New Brunswick to do this in person today here in Etobicoke, but I'm going to get over it. How come you couldn't make the drive?
Just a little too much time out of my day.
Just kidding. I appreciate you making the time to chat today. To kick things off, I have the most Canadian of questions to ask you. What's the weather like in New Brunswick right now?
Well, unfortunately, it is raining, so not very festive, Troy. But I'll say it's still a great day for Canadian craft beer. So I'm not wrong on that one.
No, and you know it's 7 degrees in Toronto today and rainy, foggy. So we're right there with you, New Brunswickers. So Christine, again, I'm glad you could be here today. It's a timely talk about beer politics with the GST HST implementation right now. But first, before we get into all the nitty gritty stuff, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, and your little bio?
Alrighty, so kicking things off, I was born in Quebec and then lived for a short time in Ottawa, but really I grew up in Halifax. I ended up going to university in Southern Ontario, lived in Hamilton, and then after being away for a dozen years or so, I moved back east. I have a husband, a daughter, and a middle-aged cat named Sunny.
Shout out to Sunny. And I understand, well, I know him, Craig, your husband, just a little shout out to Craig too, who's done a lot of work in the alcohol industry over the years.
That's Craig Pinney.
Craig Pinney, that's right. We're going to jump back and forth quite a bit in this interview, if that's okay. I want to start where you are today. I mentioned off the top you've had some different roles within the alcohol space over the years, but today, in this moment, you're the executive director of the CCBA. Again, that's the Canadian Craft Brewers Association. When did you take over the executive director role?
Yeah, I took over that role 2 years ago, but I was involved with the CCBA prior to that through my role as executive director of Craft Alcohol New Brunswick. Which
we're going to touch on in a little bit, but sticking with the CCBA, what is it? Who are your members? How does the association operate?
Right. So the CCBA was established in October 2018. So we've just celebrated our 6th anniversary. And it was really brought together and formed to be the national voice in Ottawa for small independent craft breweries. We operate under what I describe as a federated model, which means that any brewery that's a member of their provincial association across Canada, they're automatically a member of the CCBA. We also have, as kind of our membership structure, so all the heads of the provincial associations sit on my board. Their members would be members as well as the CCBA, and we also invite industry suppliers to become members of the CCBA as well.
Now, I'm going to throw a curveball question at you. Say you're not a member or your province doesn't have an association. Can a brewery join the CCBA?
Well, all provinces do have associations that are running. If that association was perhaps not running, we would make allowances to let brewers join us. However, they wouldn't have voting rights on our board. So even though, we do represent the interests of all the brewery members, when I'm in Ottawa advocating on behalf of the industry, I'm really advocating for all 1,200 breweries across Canada.
Yeah, and we've had Scott Simmons, the president of the Ontario Craft Brewers, on this show before, and we've really tried here in Ontario to grow the membership at the OCB level. And when Scott goes in and the board of the OCB go into meetings with politicians, they're not advocating just on behalf of the members, they're advocating on behalf of any brewery operating in the province. So I'm assuming that's what you're saying. You're doing the same thing.
That's right. We advocate really for the overall health and vitality of the industry.
And you and I were just in Ottawa back in October as part of the group. Yeah. I was there as part of the group from the Coalition of Canadian Independent Craft Brewers, a group that works closely with you and the CCBA. And we were there to continue pushing the federal government on beer excise tax reform. But we were also there, and one of the biggest things we were there for was to thank them. So if you could share some insights on the big win we got in the spring of 2024, that 50% reduction in taxes on breweries in the 0 to 15,000 hectoliter range.
Yeah, this is a very big deal. To actually influence excise rates at the federal level is a huge deal. So starting this past April 1st, 50% excise rate reductions are applying to the first 15,000 hectoliters of beer brewed for the next 2 years. So how is this calculated? It's, a lot of people don't quite understand how excise works. And it's a little bit like thinking of income tax, but instead of dollar tiers, the tax tiers are actually based on volume of beer brewed. So the more you brew, the higher the excise tax rate. So we did develop on the CCBA member portal website a excise tax calculator. And Troy, if you wanted to shout out a few hectoliter volume amounts, I'd plug them into this nifty calculator and I would tell you how much breweries are going to be saving because of the 50% reduction. Give me a number.
Let's say, I don't know, 25,000 hec. No, 25. Let's go under 25,000 hec.
Okay.
Let's do 14,000 hec. 14,000
hex. Okay. So 14,000 hex, a brewery in last year would have paid $156,000 and change in federal excise tax. And then with the excise duty relief, now they'll be saving $76,500. So it's a meaningful amount. Give me another number.
Let's go with 30,000. All
right. So 30,000, well, they're paying more than $500,000 in taxes. So $543,000 in tax. So then they would be saving this year $76,000. So this is an interesting number that you pulled out of the air. The excise relief does go up to the first 15,000 hex. And then beyond that, there is not that 50% rate reduction. So you're kind of the amount of excise relief above 15,000 does get diminished over time. But if you're a little brewery, let's say, I don't know, 2,000 hex. And 2,000 is still pretty decent.
You're growing, you're getting there, yep.
Yeah, you're getting there. You got some fans. So a 2,000 hec brewery would pay just over 7,000 in excise last year. And so that means this year they'd be saving around $3,500.
Which is great. So for someone like
it's meaningful.
Yeah. For someone like Great Lakes, when we were in Ottawa talking about it, we literally took what we saved in the first 0 to 15,000 hex, and we applied those savings to hire an on-premise sales manager. That on-premise sales manager then goes out and brings in all this new business that we're now paying more provincial and federal tax on. But that's where we want the industry to kind of head. You save some money. It helps with infrastructure growth. It helps with personnel. It helps with developing new brands, maybe. We'll get into more of what you and the CCBA are currently working on later, and what the next steps are in the modernization of the federal beer excise tax. As you said, and as I'm trying to put forth, it's very important work. But I want to shift gears and go back in time a little bit. Because you're at Moosehead, and I'm fascinated with Moosehead. I was there last November with Peter Bullitt, the owner of Great Lakes, Andrew Oland, the CEO, and I think he's the sixth generation Oland to run that brewery. Took us in and showed us around. What a great time. But I have it on very good authority, Christine, that you were once his boss, the CEO of Moosehead Breweries. Can you tell me about that?
That's right. I was Andrew's boss for a year. It was oh, how the mighty have fallen. He was being kind of circulated through various departments within Moosehead. He was in sales for a while, had operated on the production floor, and then, was assigned to me for a year, which I always thought was hilarious when it came to performance evaluation time. Like, come on, how am I going to treat that? Andrew, sorry, not dedicated to the company. I don't think so. So he was really fabulous to work with, and I think I learned as much from him as I hope he did from me.
In that role, you were the marketing director. You were at Moosehead for about 8 years. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
How did that shape your perspective for one day running the CCBA?
Yeah, well, working at Moosehead gave me some access to just some incredible talent. We worked with ad agencies, PR firms, package design, and research houses. So just lots and lots of top talent. It really taught me how to juggle a whole bunch of different projects at the same time, to manage some pretty big budgets, work under some incredible pressure, and I think really importantly, how to treat people. And I would also say, in some cases, how not to treat people. Okay. So I'm really thankful for my time at Moosehead.
Maybe we'd pull on that straight. That's
that's why I'm really thankful for my time there and the experience that I did gain.
Well, they're a very large but very independent brewery, very independently owned brewery. You represent the smallest independent craft brewery. Well, again, you represent all craft breweries, but the majority of the craft breweries in the country are small. Looking back to your time there, what parallels can you see between them, Moosehead, and today's craft breweries?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for working and living in the community where your head office resides. I think it really influences how you treat your people and how you support the local community. When I really kind of think of a David and Goliath kind of analogy in the beer industry, I put Moosehead in as much as a David category as I would the small craft breweries when we compare ourselves to the massive foreign-owned multinational Goliaths who are posting record-breaking profits, and they're producing hundreds of millions of hectoliters of beer every year. So I think there's a lot more that we have in common than divides us.
Yeah, and really they have the spirit of the craft in them, from the people that we run into in the industry. Just a great brewery and great representative of Canadian beer, if you will. So
yeah, and I love too that they were founded by Susanna Oland, a woman who was the original craft brewer.
1867. Craft Alcohol New Brunswick. So you leave Moosehead, you held positions in the nonprofit world, and I think in the municipality of St. John, New Brunswick as well. But the beer world, it does it to everyone. It seemed to just call you back. In 2020, you became the executive director of Craft Alcohol NB, which is the voice of craft brewers in New Brunswick. I ask everyone who leaves beer, because I left beer at one point, what brought you back? How'd you get back to beer?
Yeah, so just to be clear, so Craft Alcohol New Brunswick is a really unique model. I haven't seen it anywhere else on the planet, because the association represents not just beer, but wine, mead, spirits, and cider all under one roof. So it's a really interesting way to try to find commonality. Because otherwise you're just so little, it's hard to get any kind of influence among the policymakers out there. When
So
it came to coming back to the industry, and I really checked a lot of tick boxes on this opportunity when it opened up. In addition to working at Moosehead, I also worked at a winery slash distillery in Niagara. So I have wine, spirits, and beer experience, marketing, communications, economic development, entrepreneurial experience, because I started my own marketing consulting firm. And you know what? Being a woman didn't hurt either. I've always been open to opportunities, and when this one presented, really, I just jumped at the chance. Who wouldn't?
yeah, but I want to go back. That's unique. What you just said is that you represented all of the craft alcohol.
Yeah.
How did you divide your time, if you will, between each file? So, looking at it from a perspective here in Ontario, you go into the government and you want to talk about beer tax or opening up beer to convenience stores. Well, you have that discussion, and then someone else comes in and has the wine discussion, the cider discussion. But everything's broken up into silos. How was it? How was that a challenge going into New Brunswick, and to have a meeting about spirits saying, well, we're not getting the fair shake like beer is, but you're representing both?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So a lot of the guidance I received was from the board. So we would have a lot of these board discussions, and it came down to prioritizing. So we would identify where's the biggest pain point. We would all rally behind it. So just imagine if you're a spirit producer and you have the backing of the wine, beer, and cider producers supporting you, that's incredibly powerful. So that's how we really pushed the needle, that we would get everybody rallied together behind one common issue, tick that box, and then move on to the next one. In many cases, though, things like market access, it applied to everybody. NB Liquor, who operates the kind of the monopoly here in New Brunswick, when they had things that came in place regarding how their POS system operated, or how shipping or delivery or cold storage or warehousing, a lot of those issues or concerns apply to everybody. So that's how we were able to really get ourselves organized.
Yeah. Again, I haven't lived it, but I just think of, you have all these members sitting around a table, you have your board, but so all the beer people want something, and then you have one board member saying, well, this is what we really want. And it's like herding cats. Was it like herding cats to try to get a message put together, or a policy that you were trying to work on?
The key difference between each of the categories would have been in their own markup structures. So when you get beyond that, and there are many, many other things other than markup structures, that's when we were able to find a lot of alignment. And so when it did come to markup structures, we would identify, okay, who's in the most painful position right now? Let's see how we can help them, so then we can move on to the next priority.
Well, you were doing that during the pandemic too. Yeah. So what were some of the hot button issues that you attacked as ED during that time? Because obviously that was a challenging period for everyone in the country.
Yeah, same as everyone. We're just trying to keep businesses open and people safe. Lots of hand sanitizer, home deliveries, and craft breweries in particular, shifting from draft to cans. So, there was a couple of breweries that had a really tough time. They were primarily just doing draft and didn't really have packaged. So we would try to help them and figure out how they could start converting everything into packaged and making sure that they could still, survive. It was certainly a really, really hard time. Our hearts certainly went out to the licensees, the bars and restaurants, who had it even worse. Fortunately, alcohol was designated as a product that still could be sold. So that was good. An essential product. That's the word I'm looking for.
Essential business.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if we'll ever really truly recover from it. There's some people that are still, suffering from those losses, if not financially, then still psychologically.
Yeah, it was a very rough time in the history of the alcohol, but craft beer world. Now you're the executive director of the CCBA, but I'm sure you still keep an eye on what's happening in the New Brunswick craft scene. So for anyone listening out there, what can you tell us about it today? How are things out there in New Brunswick?
Yeah, no, I think things are moving along like fairly comparable to the rest of Canada. So the craft beer scene has evolved here to a mature market. We're still seeing investment and expansion and second or third locations opening up, which is great news. And, I really like to do my part personally to support New Brunswick's craft brewers, one beer at a time.
Nice. So we're going to get into the weeds now. We're going to move back into the CCBA and kind of on the theme of what I just asked you in New Brunswick. What is the current state of craft brewing in Canada from your perspective?
Yeah, so our industry, which had been on this fantastic growth trajectory, has matured. That means a slowdown and in some case, some closures. So last year and in the first part of this year, 70 craft breweries across Canada did not make it. They had to close their doors. Inflation has hit our industry really hard. Malt prices are up as much as 50%, aluminum cans 20, and cardboard 16. On top of that, some brewers are facing astronomical rent hikes. And our input costs, if you compare them to the large foreign-owned mainstream multinationals, are 3 times higher. So it's a lot of challenges before us, but gotta say, Troy, in spite of that, craft brewers are resilient, and those with a strong brand and a strong business model, they can continue to grow, develop, and thrive, and that's what we're seeing happen.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you finished on that note, because here in Ontario, we've seen, the convenience store model enter our lives, and it's been a scramble to get beer out to, 3,000 new points of retail. But at Great Lakes, we've had a very good year. In a year of kind of staleness, if you will, in the industry. We've actually increased and growing, which is good. And we're hearing from a lot of our friends in the industry that are also experiencing some growth and chipping away bit by bit at as you said, the big multinational conglomerates.
Yeah, Troy, I'd say, gone are the days when a home brewer could simply, start brewing out of her garage to become a reasonably, successful craft brewery. Now you really have to watch your costs really closely and produce consistently good beer and have a really strong brand in order to survive.
Well, yeah, and I guess too, it depends on what you want to be. And that's what I tell a lot of people that I talk to that are curious about joining the industry or getting into the industry as a brewer or a brewery. Do you want to be a regional brewery, get out across the province? Do you want to go national? Do you want to just be your community brewery where you have a small footprint, you produce what you want, you sell it at your front door, that's it, that's all, and you can make a nice little life for yourself that way. But like you said, the buying power, depending on your size, the more you grow, the more tax you pay, the more you're paying for raw ingredients, et cetera, which leads me into the tax modernization that we talked about earlier. Tax this, but it really does help brewers if there's a modernization. We had the last one in 1996 federally, and that's when Great Lakes actually, on the verge of bankruptcy, got a big tax break from the federal government, went out and said, with this money, we can now buy 650 ml stenciled bottles, pumpkin ale, green tea ale, orange peel, and winter ale. Those brands really put Great Lakes on the map back then. No one else was doing them. It's hard to imagine now that those brands were groundbreaking. You introduce someone to an orange peel ale today, they're just like, okay. But back then it was like, an orange peel, you can put orange in beer. And so we used that last big tax modernization and federally and developed new brands at Great Lakes. What is the next step in that the CCBA is doing to help breweries prepare for this? Or not prepare, but what are you doing to moving forward, asking the government to do moving forward to help craft breweries?
Yeah, on the excise front, there's really 2 basic elements. First is making the 50% excise relief that breweries are currently enjoying, make that permanent. And secondly, we want the federal government to change how craft brewers are defined. Right now, craft breweries hit a fiscal cliff at the 75,000 hectoliter level. That means that after 75,000 hecs, a regional brewery pays the same rate as a foreign-owned multinational. So it's like asking a middle-class family to pay the same tax rates as billionaires. It just makes no sense. So we want to provide a path for growth beyond 75,000 hecs up to 500,000 hecs to effectively remove this fiscal cliff that brewers are facing.
Yeah, and I love the analogy that you just brought up about the middle class. The 75,000 hectoliter mark, just for those at home trying to do the math. So take a brewery the size of, let's say, Steam Whistle, who is a very big perceived big brewery in Ontario. In a total year, they produce less than some of the big breweries do in a day. So take that, and they pay the exact same tax rate that Anheuser-Busch InBev at 600 million hectoliters a year globally. It's not a fair comparison. It's not, from a competitive standpoint, it's just absurd when you have, like you said, all the different provinces have a different threshold. So 400,000, 350,000, 250,000 hectoliters as the cap for craft breweries. But in Canada, it's 75, which is an astronomically small number and doesn't really provide growth opportunities, or as we call it in Ontario, like the Cell Valley, where you get up to a certain size and then you're like, why do I go above that number? Because I'm just going to get hit with a massive tax bill. So I'm glad that it's still on the CCBA's radar. I know the coalition, we're working really hard to get that, to continue lobbying the government to make a change. And we have a really good friend and the MP, Jamie Maloney, here in Etobicoke Lakeshore, who's really done a lot of work on the file. Right now, you're listening to this today, you're going to notice that beer is a little cheaper across Canada because the GST HST tax holiday, as it's being called, is currently taking place all across the country. What did the CCBA do to help breweries prepare for this, big shift? Changing POS is a big undertaking.
Yeah, we certainly got a lot of questions. And when the announcement was first made, there was very little information as to how it would actually operate at the retail level or even at the wholesale level. So we produced some common Q&As on our website, and been answering lots of questions as they come to me. I have worn many hats over my career, but I am not a tax advisor. So I was encouraging everybody with any complex tax questions, call CRA Technical GST HST Inquiries line.
Oh, that's not very nice of you, because you're just going to
when it's technical. Yeah. And the number I was encouraging them to call was 1-800-959-8287.
And that is definitely not a prank. She's really directing you to the CRA, which might be a prank. No, but it's a significant undertaking. But again, reverting back to Great Lakes, it's going to save some people up to $9 a case. And I know breweries other than Great Lakes have a little bit higher per case price than we do. So it's going to be significant savings for people across, like consumers across the province or the country in this case. What are some other files you guys are actively working on?
Yeah, we're also really closely following current and emerging bills in the Senate and the House, which are calling for warning labels on alcohol and advertising bans. It's really closely tied to the new proposed, and I say proposed, low-risk drinking guidelines, claiming that Canadians should limit their consumption to 2 drinks per week.
I've already had 2 during this show, just enough.
Right? That's fine. And, don't be mistaken, Troy, that this is part of a very well-funded global neo-prohibitionist movement to have alcohol treated like tobacco, or even worse. They want stricter packaging regulations, cancer warning labels, advertising bans, and reduced market access. So that's why we are calling for Health Canada to acknowledge to Canadians and health authorities that the current low-risk drinking guidelines are just fine, thank you very much, and that any recommendations otherwise must be based, on real science, not on this highly biased, flawed science, and frankly, just misleading information. It's just bonkers.
Yeah, I don't want to get too into the weeds on that one, but we had Dan Malik, the professor at Brock University. He was at the Ontario Craft Brewers Conference back in October, and walking through that report. Not, it's not law, it's not anything official. It's just a report that was, Health Canada had provided funding to this company or this agency who did this, but 16,000 reports whittled down to 6,000, whittled down to 16, and then said, of those 16, we really like 6 of those that kind of fit what we're trying to shoehole or put into, our own
That's
words. Right. And the scary thing is, Christine, too, and we've seen it, and I'm sure you've heard about it from other jurisdictions, but we've seen and heard of health departments in regions in Ontario actually adopting this. When someone goes to a medical doctor, they're saying, well, our health department is actually referring to this report as, oh, you drink more than 2 beers a week. Well, you're on a high risk for developing cancer. We've seen in BC the Proof campaign where, they're putting billboards up saying, if you drink wine, you may die from cancer. Other than just lobbying, is there any messaging that consumers out there, or can they get more information?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. First off, I think people have to be aware that this is a movement that is afoot. They're extremely well funded. If we let them get their way, it's going to be to the detriment of certainly our culture and our lifestyle, and just the enjoyment of having a glass of wine or a beer with a meal. Mm-hmm. It makes it sometimes difficult for industries themselves to advocate on their own behalf. So if we say, oh, well, we don't believe in this, they'll say, oh, well, they're biased. They're just trying to support their own personal interests. But when we have folks like Dan Malik from Brock University, or even consumers saying, wait a minute, this doesn't sound right, and doing their own kind of research and, letting the elected officials and policymakers know that this just doesn't make sense, that goes an extremely long way. We are going to probably have an election cycle coming up soon. And, this would be something interesting to talk to the candidates out there to say, where do they stand on this? Well,
one of the things about an early election, perhaps, is that the bill that's before Senate that went through second reading, Senator Brazeau's bill, would then be null and void, and would have to get started back up again with a new government, if that's the case formed. Senator Brazeau's bill is essentially saying, one, you have to put cancer warnings or poisonous warnings on your beer labels. How will that impact breweries across the country if, say, that was to go through? If you're looking at 1,200 breweries, what would be the impact that you could see happening from changing every label that you produce?
It would be a nightmare. I also, as much as a nightmare as it would be just in terms of the packaging that would have to be changed in order to comply with the new regulation, it creates this kind of wedge effect of saying, well, what's next? Are we going to have packaging that looks somewhat like tobacco, or are we going to have packaging which is not going to allow even brand graphic design or names? Like, how far can this go? So we're just very cautious. And frankly, with Health Canada, we ask, well, what problem are you actually trying to solve? We certainly advocate for responsible consumption. The way we operate our tap rooms supports that. The way our product is priced supports that as the certainly traditional beverage of moderation. So I think that if we were trying to go after problem drinking or underage drinking, then we should be much more strategic. Right now, it feels like this blanket statement is being imposed by everyone. And then where does it end? What's going to be next? Fast food, soft drinks? Maybe we should start driving in vehicles because that poses a risk to our health. It's not reflective of how we live our lives. And frankly, I wouldn't want to live my life without alcohol.
Me neither. So speaking about labels and putting things on labels, you have at the CCBA, you have the Independent Craft Seal Authenticity. What is that?
Yeah, it's a seal that appears on packaging, and it lets folks know that it is authentic craft beer. Um, I'm going to say it's more important than ever. We really do stand united as an industry. We're talking about these global movements. So we want to stand united in how we promote both nationally and internationally our second to none Canadian craft beer. So we did create the Independent Craft Seal of Authenticity for independent craft brewers so that when consumers see the seal, they can count on choosing local and choosing quality and choosing independence. If there are any brewers out there not already proudly displaying the seal on their packaging, I ask them please consider doing so. It not only helps beer lovers choose beer that's been developed and produced by a small independent craft Canadian brewery, but it signals to the elected officials and the policymakers across Canada that craft brewers are a united force and we will not be ignored. So let's show them that together we are stronger.
And you have the Canada Beer Cup as well, too. So what's all that about?
Yeah, we're entering our fourth year. And the Canada Beer Cup is Canada's most technical and Canada's only not-for-profit competition. That means all proceeds do go back towards our federal advocacy efforts. So last year there was 56 beer categories, and we introduced new packaging categories, and we brought together, there was 30 plus judges, and we had folks from the Netherlands, Italy, Mexico, across the US, and certainly across Canada. And we had fun judging in Niagara Falls at Blackburn, and then had our gala, awards gala presentation that was held in New Westminster, so kind of East Vancouver in British Columbia. And that was done in partnership with the BC Craft Brewers Guilds Conference.
You mentioned that the judging took place in Ontario, but the awards were in BC. Is there a reason why Ontario held why did you come to Ontario to do the judging if it was out in BC, the awards?
Yeah, so there's a time span between when the judging happens and when the gala is. We need time to engrave our awards and things like that and get ready. In this case, Blackburn has a beautiful, beautiful, huge cold storage room. And so we love to treat the craft beer with care and keep it cold so that it's in pristine condition when it's ready for judging. So that was really what swayed us to be in Niagara.
And so you did in BC last year. Where is it going to be in 2025? Are you going to tie it in with another conference? Because I know 2023 was in Ontario, is in Niagara Falls, and last year in BC during the BC Brewers Conference. I'm assuming it was during the conference.
Yeah, it was. We have not made that announcement. We are well underway in our plans, but we just have to make sure a few I's are dotted and T's crossed before we make any formal announcements for next year.
You're not coming back to Ontario this year?
I don't know.
I was hoping for some breaking news here. So where did you source, I have to ask because I think they're really awesome, the cool crowns that the winners got this year?
Oh, weren't they fun? They were,
yeah, pretty awesome.
Such a huge hit. Those were sourced from a company called Steel City Tap Company, and Steel City, no, not the Hamilton of Steel City.
Yeah.
No. And so if you wanted to find them, you could find them online. I think they're steelcitytaps.com.
Nice. Well, before we wrap up this part of the interview, before we get into the rapid fire questions, I wanted to just ask you if there's anything that you want to mention to the listeners that we haven't covered yet. Anything fun, exciting, or just a last message you want to leave with people?
You know what? I'm going to talk about Canada Beer Cup for a second. So BC is very active in their entries in Canada Beer Cup. And in fact, last year, I think there was twice as many BC entrants than there were from Ontario. So I'm going to do a shout out to Ontario listeners here. Step it up. Give BC a run for their money in 2025. Canada Beer Cup competition is going to be opening up in May, and really hope that you consider entering and see if you can maybe outpace BC this year.
Well, now I'm really putting you on the hot seat here. When it was in Ontario, did more Ontario breweries enter than BC that year?
There were a little bit more, but BC still outpaced Ontario even in spite of that.
Okay. All right, BC, we're coming for you. Okay, Christine, I'm going to take one more sip of my beer. We're going to come right back with some rapid fire questions. So hang tight. We'll be right back with rapid fire questions.
Hey craft beer lovers, ready to show off your passion? Let me introduce you to Hop Bomb Apparel Company. This isn't just another t-shirt brand. Hop Bomb puts the same care and detail as a master brewer into every design, crafting each tee with original beer-inspired graphics, using premium fabrics and small batch screen printing methods. So whether you're visiting your local brewery, hitting up a beer festival, or just hanging out with friends, show off your love for craft beer and style with Hop Bomb Apparel. And right now, you can get 10% off your order with the code FERMENT10 at checkout. So check out hopbombapparel.ca and find your next favorite beer drinking tea.
We're back with Christine Comeau for some rapid fire questions. Are you ready for this, Christine?
All right, fire away.
What beer have you been enjoying recently?
I'm going to talk about this new Belgian wit beer, Cork Strangeness and Charm, that I tried, and from Pile of Bones Brewing in Regina, Saskatchewan, and they were the Grand Poobah winner of Canada Beer Cup.
Nice. I've heard they do some pretty amazing beers out there. Name your celebrity doppelganger.
I am stumped on that one. I cannot think of a thing. Got any suggestions for me?
I don't know. I'm pretty bad at it. I'll come back to that one. Name a person or brewery in the industry that has or continues to inspire you.
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to do a huge shout out to my board chair, Blair Berdusco. She's the executive director of the Alberta Small Brewers Association, and she's just provided fantastic leadership, dedication, and passion for the industry. And, I've got to also do a shout out to my Canada Beer Cup competition manager, Hillary Hochstein. I really can't do this without her. She's smart, strategic, creative, and beyond capable, and a heck of a lot of fun to be around. So thanks, Hillary.
Hillary's amazing. And Hillary, if you're listening up there in Thunder Bay, hello.
She is amazing.
Best time and place for a beer?
Oh, well, there's no bad time or place, but I'm going to say gardening.
Okay. After gardening or during gardening?
Oh, during.
During and after. Favorite brewery you've ever toured?
Oh, boy. It's like you're asking me to name my favorite child. That's so hard. But, I'm going to say my most memorable would be when I first toured Moosehead Breweries. I was kind of blown away by the size and scale. And
under the road, the tanks are the lagering tanks are under the road, which is crazy. So yeah, I'm with you there. It's one of my favorite brewery tours I've ever had. If you could only drink one beer for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I think I'd go with a Czech Pilsner from a local craft brewery.
Okay. Favorite place in Canada to grab a beer?
Oh boy, this is a good one. There's a spot called La Taverne Storehouse, and it's in the Fortress of Louisbourg in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. It's got to be the coolest place that I've enjoyed a beer in quite some time. And in this case, I was enjoying a nice brew of Breton Brewing's beer.
Oh, okay. I was going to say Breton or Big Spruce. I was going to guess.
Yeah, Breton. And you know what else is cool is they also have overnight accommodation at the Fortress. And I stayed in the prison. So yep, you heard that right. Another super, super cool experience. I highly recommend.
What do you love most about your job?
Oh, no question. The people. I think Canada's craft brewing industry just attracts the best people with the biggest hearts I've ever met.
Do politicians really understand the beer file?
Oh, That's a very good question. You know what? I think they understand what they need to understand, and that's the major economic and social impact of our industry. We employ over 21,000 people. That's like 60% of all industry jobs. Plus, there's another 8,800 or so in the tourism sector. We contribute 1.7 billion in total GDP. So I think that the politicians, the elected officials, they understand the impact craft breweries have on local communities, that we hire local, we buy local, including, Canadian grown agriculture. Our tap rooms are performance venues, they're display spaces for artists, they're tourism destinations, and we're even dog friendly. So we're the heart of many, many local communities. So
community
really,
hubs is what craft breweries are. Community hubs.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
it's hard to find a politician in this country. It really is, that doesn't have a brewery in their riding. We have,
That's right.
we actually found one person that we know of in Ontario that doesn't have one, and we're working to get him one. What's it like?
And that includes a lot in rural communities as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yes, 100%. What's it like working with so many differing voices in Canada?
Well, I do believe there's more that unites us than divides us. In one way, when I started working with CCBA, it was a little bit easier because then I really only did have to focus on beer, not all craft alcohol categories. But I got to say as well, my chair, my executive committee, and my entire board really does help me stay focused.
Nice. And the very last rapid fire question, what is the best hangover cure for Christine?
I'm going to say water the night before. And failing that, I'm going for some French fries.
Okay. That's a new one. We haven't had that one on the show yet. Christine, that's it. That's all I've got for you. Thank you very much for sharing your story with me, telling everyone about the CCBA, and the work that you do on behalf of the thousands of independent craft breweries right across the country. Where can more people find information on the CCBA? You mentioned the website.
Yeah, the URL, it's ccba-ambc.org. So check it out. And if you are a member of your local provincial association, then it gives you also access to our member portal,
where you can post jobs and read the blog. Christine just put out a blog, I think it was December 10th. And it was on, the year 2024 and what the CCBA have done. So go check that out. Christine, thank you very much again for coming on. A big cheers. Thank you.
Santé. Santé to your health. Cheers. Thanks.
Cheers. Yeehaw! The man in the white lab coat is back and ready to wrangle some yeast. GLB's Quality Assurance Lab Supervisor Cole Racecomes returns to take you on the adventurous ride into the world of yeast. Take it away, cowboy.
Thanks, Troy. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another Cole's Notes segment. Quick pop quiz. Of the four main ingredients that we use in beer, those being water, barley, hops, and yeast, there's only one that we can make ourselves. Which ingredient is it? If you said yeast, then you are correct. We grow yeast in every beer that we make. So today, we're going to put our yeast farmer caps on and learn a little bit about yeast wrangling. It all starts with propagation, which involves taking a smaller volume of parent yeast and growing it in a small tank. This is like a small-scale fermentation, but there are a few key differences. First, the nutrient requirements are much higher for propagation than they are for fermentation. We add a higher dose of yeast nutrient, which contains zinc, magnesium, and several other nutrients to help our yeast grow nice and strong. We also add a significant amount more oxygen to give our yeast a little bit of extra help with their exponential growth that we're trying to achieve. Second, the time frame of the propagation is only a couple days, as our primary goal is to help the yeast undergo rapid growth, not fully ferment the wort. Once we've propagated our yeast, we send it out into the world to make tasty, tasty beer, but that is not where the journey ends. We add our propagated yeast into wort and let it fully ferment, but once it's done, we collect it and use the still healthy yeast to brew another beer. This is called cropping. And each time we crop, the yeast goes up by a generation number, much like a mother becomes a grandmother as more of her children have kids. Each tank of beer makes approximately enough healthy yeast for 2 to 3 batches of beer, depending on the batch size and other things. It's also important to note that we can't crop yeast from any tanks that has been dry hopped, as the hops can negatively impact the health of our yeast and lead to fermentation issues in later generations. And there you have it. Each brewery is actually a yeast farm in disguise. Who knew that science could taste so good?
I did, Cole, because every time we have a show, you tell me all about it. Thanks so much, buddy.
Thanks, Troy. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Around the industry.
Around the industry. Yep, it's that time. We're nearing the end of the show. By the time you're listening to this, and as you heard Christine and I discuss, the federal GST, HST tax holiday is in full effect across Canada. All beer across the country is exempt from either GST or, in the case of Ontario, HST, 13%. Here at GLB, the price of a 2-4 of Canuck, which is the beer, is now $53.10. Crazy to think that $6.90 of every case of beer goes to the federal government, HST. The tax holiday, as it's being referred to, runs until Saturday, February 15th, 2025. Over at the Master Brewers Association, District Ontario, registration is now open for their technical conference. The 2-day conference is being held in Niagara-on-the-Lake, January 30th to the 31st, and features 2 jam-packed days of education. Our man in the white coat in the lab, you heard him earlier, Cole Racecombs, will be sitting on a panel discussing current trends in brewery microbiology and quality control. Sure to be a barn burner. The folks behind the Brewers Journal magazine are looking for nominations for their annual Canadian Brewers Choice Awards. They have several categories, including Young Brewer of the Year, Brewer of the Year, Brewery of the Year, New Brewery of the Year, Beer of the Year, and more. Head over to brewerschoiceawards.com and shout out to my buddy Richie. This Thursday at Bryden's on Bloor here in Toronto, I'm hosting my annual Industry Christmas Social. I think it's the 15th or 16th year that we've been doing this. Show up anytime after 3 p.m. and enjoy the company of people who celebrate this great industry. You don't have to work in beer to come drink our beer. Big congratulations to our friends over at Beyond the Pale in Ottawa on the successful opening of the BTP Tap Room in Byward Market. This huge space is in a historic building is now ready to serve you 7 days a week. Big shout out to Rob, Shane, Jamie, and the whole crew there for just doing some amazing things in Ottawa. As I mentioned in the last episode, the 16th annual Hops for Hunger campaign at Great Lakes Brewery is on in support of Daily Bread Food Bank. Cans of white eggnog stout and vanilla porter are now available at the brewery and brew pub. When you visit, please bring along some non-perishable food items to help us fight to end hunger in our communities. And that's it. That's all, folks. Episode 25 with Christine Comeau, the Executive Director of the Canadian Craft Brewers Association, has moved from the mash tun to the fermenters. Today's episode was fueled by cans of white eggnog stout, a deliciously flavorful one-off that was brewed with love and support for Daily Bread Food Bank. You can find this beautiful beer online at greatlakesbeershop.ca or at both GLB retail stores. Also, keep an eye out for it on tap at terrific beer bars across Ontario. $1 from each can or pour goes straight to Daily Bread, and that $1 allows them to feed one family in need. You can visit the brewery at 30 Queen Elizabeth Boulevard in Etobicoke or grab some delicious eats and fresh pours at a brew pub at 11 Lower Jarvis Street in Toronto. If you have any content you'd love to hear us discuss on the show, guest ideas, or just want to tell us what you're drinking, drop us a line at podcast@greatlakesbeer.com. Until next time, please remember to keep tipping your glass of fresh GLB in the right direction. Supporting local never tasted so good.
To learn more about what's happening at Great Lakes Brewery, visit greatlakesbeer.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter or follow Great Lakes Beer on your favorite social media platforms.